see. There we go. Hopefully you all can hear me now. I've unmuted everything. I've turned on my mic. Just give me a thumbs up. Stop talking. Okay. So hopefully you can hear me. And everything is fine. So Nancy says me too. So I will go back over the intro. If you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me or some comment, then I'll go back over the intro because people make great. So people may join who don't know me. And so my name is Catherine and I'm the owner of Sew Your Bag. So every other month, I have a subscription box and the subscribers receive the box. And then once they receive it, I do a 3-part sew along. So the first day is prepping. So I talk about how to interface the pieces and I really give a general overview. I used to actually cut everything out and interface everything, but now all I do is give a general overview. And then on day 2, we do the exterior of the bag. So last evening, we did the exterior. So this is actually, I use different fabric than was in the box, and I'll show you what the box fabric looks like. But we did the exterior, we put on the purse feet, we did the roll handles. So last night was a little bit of a long night. So if you've started with day 3 and you want to see what happened, it's all recorded. So you just can start at the beginning. If you're comfortable with the interfacing portion of it, you can then just go to day 2 and work on the construction of the handles, like I said, and the exterior. So for tonight, we're going to be going through the lining, and the lining is going to be okay. So I'm just looking at the comments. So Susan, so everybody said that they can hear me. Yay! So tonight we're going to do the lining, and I turned the actual bag inside out. So this is the fabric that came in the box, and so we're going to have 2 slip pockets. So this one is divided in 2, and on the opposite wall we're going to have one that's divided into 3. So you can divide it into as many sections as you would like. I give you the measurements, and I'll talk about how I divided it. Dividing it in 2 is just dividing it in half. And dividing it in 3, I just measured from the center over. So depending on how you're going to use the bag and use the pockets, you can modify how large or small your pockets are. So you may want to do it, for example, and put little slim pockets where you can put pens or pencils or a marker, and then maybe make one a little bit bigger so you can put your cell phone. So you can adjust it any way you'd like. And like I said, I'm only going to do 2 and 3. So I'm going to turn the bag out right side out so you can get a full view of what was contained in the box. It is waterproof canvas and cotton. You can absolutely make the bag 100% cotton. Just make sure that if in place of the waterproof canvas, you use interfacing for that cotton fabric, right? So all of your cotton fabric should be interfaced if you decide to make the bowler totally out of cotton. It is a beginner bag. However, it is considered an adventurous beginner or more leaning towards the intermediate side because we are doing these rolled handles and there are curves, right? So all of that is a little bit more elevated in skill. So when it comes to making the bag, it is more adventurous beginner. So if you think you're up to the task and you want to give it a try, everything else is just really, really basic though. It's straight sewing. There's nothing, no fancy sewing or anything. Okay. So let's get started. So I will show you what we should be working on or working with tonight. All right. So I kind of started it already. So you should have your pocket. Your pocket itself should be in 2 pieces, right? So we're going to need 2 pieces for our pocket. We're going to need a front, and then the waterproof canvas is going to be the back. Being that I have 2 pockets that I need to make, I need 2 of each of these. You will also need your lining. So you will need 2 pieces of your lining fabric. When it comes to the actual bag itself, so this is my bag. When I open it up, it's not finished on the inside. All right. So I've already attached the bottom gusset piece. So that's why there is none here. And we're going to be attaching this piece, the front and the back, to the gusset piece that goes around the inside of the bag. You're also going to need, if you would like to have some stability on the bottom, you're going to need some type of plastic. So this is just a cutting board piece of plastic. And once you're done, you're going to measure your bag. I've given you estimates in the pattern. However, you should measure your bag before you cut it. Measure your bag and do this to the measurements of your bottom, right? Because I may have a 1/2 inch and you may have 3/8 of an inch. So depending on how it comes out. And we'll talk about that when we're getting ready to insert this. So let's take a look at the pocket itself. So like I said, I've already done one. And what you'll see from this one is that I have the lining coming through to the front. So that means the front is going to be shorter than the back. So these are the 2 pieces. One is shorter than the back. And I'm going to use this piece that rolls over to the front as sort of like a border. And one of the things is when you look in a bag, you want to be able to very clearly see where the pocket is. And sometimes if it's all the same color, you can't necessarily see where the pocket is. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to take our shorter front piece and I'm going to flip it over so that the lining, which is the waterproof canvas, and my main fabric are right sides together. So I'm just want to make sure I don't miss any comments. All right. So once they're right sides together, and they should be the same length, you're going to clip them. So I'm going to just clip it on one side, which is this one long side. And we're going to start with one side, and then we're going to go to the other side. I'm going to sew this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you should put as many clips as you need to hold it in place. So I normally put one in the middle, one on either side, and then you can add as many as you would like. Okay. And then once you have that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew that at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am using a stitch length of between 3 or 3.5. It's up to you. I am going to back tack at the beginning and the end. And once I've done that, I'm going to go back to the cutting mat so we could take a look. All right. So now that's done, 1/4 inch. So now what I'm going to do is take the other long edge and I'm going to match it. Now, when I match these two together like this, you will see it'll sort of bow. That's what it's supposed to do. Because remember, the front is shorter than the back. So just line everything up. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sew this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So next what we're going to do is we're going to turn the tube. This is actually just a tube, and we're going to turn it so that it's right side out. I can't always get my hand in there because it is a little smaller. So what I do is I just stick my hand in there and then I start bunching it up. It will be a little bit stiff, but just bunch it up, sort of like what you do with pantyhose, um, and or socks. And then you're going to just push it in, and you should be able to then grab the other side and pull it out, right side out. Now this will get kind of wrinkled, so I am going to iron it. Make sure that for waterproof canvas, you're not on the side that's like this waxy or plasticky side. You're on the side that looks like fabric. And when I look at it, I'm going to roll this bottom seam. I'm going to do like a little bit of a roll and press. And when I do that to the bottom and I push down, you'll see that I get that border at the top. So that was this border here at the top. But what I will do is I'm now going to take it and iron it so that this stays flat, or as flat as possible. And then once I've gotten that flat, I'm going to push up and then iron the top, which is a waterproof canvas. You can iron on the waterproof canvas. Just don't let your iron rest on it. Right? You don't want it to rest on it. And what you will also notice is when you iron it, it will get soft. And that's nothing to worry about because once it cools off, it'll get hard again. It'll get rigid. So I'm just going to iron that and make sure that that bottom seam is ironed. Now, it's not going to be as if you're ironing cotton, so you're not going to necessarily get this totally crisp kind of crease at the bottom, but you will get it flatter. And the other thing is you will be taking out the wrinkles that are in here. All right. So now that's done. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on the fabric portion, not on the waterproof canvas, but on the fabric. If anybody wants to know the seam allowance, so the seam is pushed down towards the bottom. And it naturally falls that way, so I just let it fall whichever direction it falls in. So let's stitch that with a stitch length of 4 at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you have difficulty sewing an 1/8 of an inch, you can always use a 1/4 of an inch. Just do it on the fabric side. Stitch length is a 4. Between a 4 and a 4.5. It's up to you. Okay. Now we have that and that one. That's done. So you should do the same steps for the other pocket, and you should have 2 identical pockets. I don't know how I did that, but I almost got like the same thing. I just cut the fabric and it came out almost exactly the same. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to place it on our lining piece. So for anybody who is following along with the pattern, I will tell you where we are. We're past the congratulations, you've gotten this far part of it. And so I'm now on page 26, which is adding the slip pocket to the lining. So I'm going to set one of these aside and I'm going to grab one of my lining pieces. So just so that you know, this is wider. It is wider than the actual piece. That was intentional, just to give you some wiggle room. And then we're going to cut it off when we're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure up from the bottom. And I've marked my center on these by folding it, my lining. I folded it in half like this. And I put a mark at the top and the bottom. I actually snipped the top and the bottom. So we're going to measure up from the bottom. And we're going to measure 1 inch up from the bottom. And we're going to place our pocket. Now that border should be at the top and the pocket should be 1 inch up. So it should be just like that. If you want, you can put it higher, but remember, if you put it higher, what's going to end up happening is if you put something tall in there and you try to close it, you won't. So I put it as close down to the bottom as I could without getting it into the seam allowance. So once you have it at 1 inch, put some clips on the side. To hold it in place. So I'm just going to add some clips here to hold it in place. All right. And I have the other one done as well, so I'll set that one up also. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and before we divide the pocket, we're going to attach the pocket first, and then we're going to come back, place our marks to divide the pocket, and then we'll do one that's 2 and one that's 3. So to attach the pockets to the bottom of our lining is I'm going to sew using a 1/8 seam allowance across the bottom right here on both of these pieces, and then they will be attached. So I don't have to worry about them moving around, and then we'll come back and we'll divide them. So let's go to the sewing machine and attach this using 1/8 inch seam allowance, and I am using a stitch length of 4. You can use 4.5, 3. It's up to you. Just be consistent in what you're doing. So that's one, and then I'm going to do the next one also. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start dividing this. So I'll divide the first one in half, and that one's the easiest one. Because you have the center marks, you don't really have to measure if you fold it in half. If you'd like, you can. I'm just going to use my little notches here, and I'm going to put the ruler right down the center. And like I said, you can make these any distance you'd like or any width you'd like. So this one's going to be 2, so I'm just going to draw a line. This is a heat erasable. If I put the iron on it, it will erase that line. Use something that you can erase or that does get removed. Don't use a permanent marker. All right, so that's the first one. The next one I'm going to divide into 3. And so I'm still going to use those center marks to divide it in 3. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure to the right, and then I'm going to measure to the left, and that's going to give me my center pocket. So for the center pocket, just to make sure I going to according to the directions, we are on page, and I should have them memorized, right? Bottom. And I'm dividing the pockets, and then I'll go back and do the sewing. So Dividing the pocket is, I'm doing them at the same time, but in the directions, they have you do this one, sew it, and then come back and do this one. So this one, I'm going to measure 2 inches to the right of the center mark here, 2 inches. And then I'm going to measure 2 inches to the left. So that means that my center pocket ends up being 4 inches wide. Once again, you can make it any width you would like. So that's 2 inches this way. So then I need to go 2 inches on the other side. And that's how I get my 3. And I will come back later on with my iron and get rid of those marks. All right, so this is 4 inches right here in the middle. Okay. So now that we've done that, we're going to go to the sewing machine. Now, what I do in lieu of back tacking, and you can definitely back tack if you would like, but what I do is I start by sewing towards the top of the bag. So I'll show you on the one that's 2. So when I go to the sewing machine, I turn this piece upside down just like this, and I start sewing in this direction. So I will sew in this direction. When I get to the top, I leave my needle down. I then rotate it back in this direction, and then I sew over those stitches. So instead of back tacking, that's what I do. And what I will also do while I'm there is fix this pocket because it's at an angle. So I will fix that when I get there also. I can see it's angular. I don't know if you guys can see it on the camera, but I can see it on my side. So it's just like a 1/4 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch off. So I will fix that. So I will do that at the sewing machine for both the 3, the one that's split in 3, and the one that's split in the one that's split in 3 and the one that's split in 2. So once again, I'm going to start with it upside down and go from there. I just want to fix this when I get to the sewing machine. Nobody actually, it wasn't off by a lot. Once again, we're talking about that OCD thing. I could see it. So I want to fix it. I don't want to have a tipsy pocket. So I'll start by doing that, and then I'll come back and do the other part. I could draw a line going across, and I know that I'm following the line, but I'm okay. So I'll start with this one and then come back. So let's go to the sewing machine. Let me fix that 1 inch line. I'm using a stitch length of 4. And now we're going to sew it down in the middle. So the way I'm going to do it, as I mentioned before, is I'm turning my pocket upside down, completely upside down. I'm starting right here on the border. So right there where it meets. Put my needle down. I'm going to stitch forward. I actually go 1 stitch over. And then what I'm going to do is rotate my wheel so the needle goes up, lift my presser foot, leaving the needle down, and then rotate it again 180 degrees, and then just sew straight down. Right over those stitches. And then I back tack. So that one's stitched in 2. What I'm going to do also is I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch here just to lock down these 2 pieces so I don't have anything getting away from me when I'm trying to put the lining in the bag. So you may have seen me do this before where I try to sew all the pieces together, so I'm really only dealing with 2 pieces. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So it's 1/8 of an inch away. I didn't change the stitch length. So now let's go and do the one that has 3 the same way, right? So we've already stitched the bottom. Turn it upside down, start at your border, stitch towards the top. I go 1 stitch over, rotate my hand wheel so the needle's going up. Don't take it completely out. Rotate this 180 degrees. Drop your presser foot and stitch to the bottom. And then I just do a little back tack at the bottom. I'm going to do the same for the other side. Lift, rotate, and then stitch all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm going to back tack. Okay? I'm now going to just turn it over and stitch these pieces together. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. Okay, so let's go back to the cutting mat. Is that Miss Varna? How you doing? Cooking dinner? So I see you say you're cooking dinner and getting your steps in. That's what I'm reading. You say running, I say getting your steps in. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to trim this off. These little pieces over here, I need to trim them off. So you can use your scissor. I'm just going to use my rotary cutter and cut them so it's totally flush with the sides. I don't need those extra little pieces now. They were just used so that I can make sure that I caught them at the end. And believe it or not, tonight's going to be a pretty quick night because we did a lot of heavy lifting yesterday. All right, so now that the pockets are done, we now just need to put the lining in, right? Because we've done the pockets already. So we're going to put the lining in the same way that we did the front and the back. So we're going to do it the same exact way. So what we're going to need to do is grab our bag, and we're going to turn our bag wrong side out or inside out. I'm going to turn this inside out. Brats and crowds, nothing fancy. I like brats and crowd. Well, I don't like the crowd. I do like the brat, though. I think I had tuna tonight for dinner. All right, so we're going to put that right side out. And just like we talked about yesterday, I'm only going to sew using one piece. Now, what I will say to you is if you did the exterior, go back because it was a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Go back to your exterior and trim off about half of that. So you only have about 1/4 inch. And the reason that you're doing that is because you don't want to have the bulk inside your bag. So give me 1 second. So I've already done that. I've trimmed mine up. So I eliminated that extra bulk because we're going to have 2 1/2 inch seams, right? We're going to have one for the lining. So we're going to have one for this and we're going to have one for that. And so to minimize the bulk, cut this part to about 1/4 inch. And then we're going to go back later on and cut this so we don't have as much bulk in there. The other thing that I do, and I'll do it with the lining as well, I didn't do it with the exterior, but I'll do it with the lining. Whenever I have to do a 1/2 inch, no. So Susan's asking, and I hope it's okay if I post it, Susan, because this is other people may have the same question. It says, are we putting the cutting board into the lining or dropping it into the bottom of the bag? So we're going to do that at the very end. So when we put our bag together, down here, we're going to have an opening. Once we have it together, through that opening, we're going to slip in the bottom, the plastic. You're going to measure it, and you don't really have to glue it down or anything because it's going to fit exactly in that space. That's why I said we'll wait till we're done and we're going to do it, and it'll sit right on the bottom. It's going to be a little tricky to get it in, but when we put it in, what I have you do is push it in like this. It'll curve over to your front or your back, depending on how your bag is laid out. And then once it's in there, you can rotate it so that it sits parallel to the bottom of your bag. So we do it at the end. I didn't want to do it beforehand because we're turning the bag right side out through the lining. And with the waterproof canvas and that plastic, it's going to be extremely thick. So this is not a drop-in lining, so it's not something that we can do very easily. And yes, Nancy, I fixed my foot. I didn't find my screwdriver, but I did fix my foot. Okay, so everybody's making me hungry. I look away from the comments and then I see all the comments and I get them all at one time. And I'm like, oh, so everybody's making me hungry here. Okay, so I turn the bag inside out. I cut this extra down to 1/4 inch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pocket. Now you can determine which you want to make the front or the back. I don't have, remember my front was this big motif here. I don't really have a preference of what, whether the 2 pocket or the 3 pocket go to the front or the back. I guess for weight, you would put the 3 pocket because it'll probably be heavier. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your exterior that's here and just push it down so it's out of the way. So the only thing that you have facing you is the lining, right? So you want to get this kind of out of the way in there. It's inside out. Oh, sorry. We're gonna have to do it a little bit differently. We're gonna push everything down and we have to pull the back side up. Just like that. So you have to push everything down. And the reason I say that is because it has to be right sides together. Stick your handle in there. And we're actually taking the very back piece of our lining. And you'll see what I mean. We then have to put this on top, right side down or wrong side up. But these 2 pieces have to match right sides together. If I would have done it with this, it would be wrong sides together. And that's not right. It'll be wrong side and wrong side. And that's not right. So we push the entire front or back piece all the way down and then grab the lining from the other side. So I'm going to, once again, remember we had like a 3-inch mark on here. So I've already, I'll mark my 3-inch mark here. And remember the 3-inch mark was to help us line it up with this side seam over here. So I'll draw a 3-inch mark. And I'm drawing it on the back because that's how I'm lining it up. All right, so I'm going to start at the top. And I'm just going to start clipping. Remember, it's right sides together, so you should be pulling the far part of your lining. And I'll line up the side because that's my 3-inch. I push my seam down towards the bottom, and I line up the seam right there. You can open it if you'd like, because there isn't enough of a seam allowance here, but I just push it down towards the bottom. And then you should match your center after you've done your sides, or do your center and then your side. So match all these pieces first, and then come back and do. Now I work out from the center, so I'll work out from the center on the bottom. I'll work out from the center on the top. So I try to do all the straight edges first when I clip. Now, when I sew this, I'm going to be turning the bag this way, only because it's easier for me to sew, believe it or not, to sew this way, than to push the bag down like this and try to sew that seam. So whatever works for you is totally fine. I'm just telling you how I do it. If you get to the corners and you can't quite get it to fit, like if I get here and I can't get it to fit just the way I want it to fit, I mentioned this yesterday, you can take a scissor. We're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and along this straight edge, the piece that goes around, you can take little snips up to like 1/4 inch. You could do like this, and then you should be able to pull your material or splay it so that then it will fit around the corner. So if you have any difficulty doing that, you can do that with it. I normally get all as straight as I can going out to those corners. I'm just turning my corners up so it's facing me so I can see how I'm clipping on this side. Clipping mean with the clips, not with the scissor. But once again, if you need to, you can take little snips in the corners. Now, it doesn't really matter where you leave the opening. You just have to leave the opening on one of the sides. So what I will say to you is I do it last. But if you want to do it now so you don't forget later, you can do it now. But I do it in the directions I do it with the second piece. I don't know why I was reaching across myself for the clips. Something else you can do if you would like, and I wouldn't do this if you were using vinyl with cotton or waterproof canvas, it's totally fine. You can get one of those, a little stapler, and you can actually staple this and then go back later and pull out the staples if you would like. So that's something that, bag makers do, especially when they're dealing with curves, because then you don't have to deal with the clips. So I can do that, and then I can pull the waterproof canvas and get it totally flat around that curve. What I will say is, if you decide to use a stapler, make sure you get them out, and also make sure you keep them out of your sewing path, right? You don't want them in the path of where you're sewing, where you hit it with the needle. You want to get it out of the path of the needle. So it's one thing to be careful about. So I kind of did a little sloppy job here with the cutting. It's not round with the cutting of my pattern piece on this one corner, so I can see that. Okay. So now once I have everything clipped in place, just like that, right? I'm going to go to the sewing machine. Okay, before you stitch, can you show us? Sure. Okay. So before I sew this together, I should have done it. So you can see like this side of it, there's no lining. You see there's no lining at all over here, because what I did, and I'll take out a couple of these clips, is I pulled the lining that was on this side, I pulled it up just like that. So there is no lining, and that's what I'm clipping. There's no lining for the top round part. That's what I'm clipping my interior front or back to, because I can't do it when I mentioned it before. Your zipper has two lining pieces at the top, right? It's got one over here and one over here. You can't clip it to this, because if you do, it will be wrong side to wrong side. So what I did is I pushed that out of the way, the one that's immediately in front, and I grabbed the one that was in back and I flipped it up. So when you're done on this side and you're done clipping, you should see no lining at all going anywhere around. And that's because you've pulled it to the front. And once you pull it to the front, then you can clip it in place. And when we turn it right side out, what you will see is that it will have, when we turn it around, you'll see that then everything is right sides together. And then we'll do the same for the other side. So I hope that makes sense, Susan. So I'm just going to clip this again, clip this back. And then I'm going to do the same over here. And this is why I stitched that pocket on the side, because it's very easy to lose that pocket and you'll stitch your whole bag together and realize you didn't catch your pocket. So that's why I did it that way. Now, some people will stitch this. I have a straight stitch machine, meaning I don't have the piece that comes off for like sleeves. And so some people will take their bag and hold it this way and sew around that way. I just lay my bag flat like this and fold in everything and just go around and stitch. So it's whatever, sorry about that. It's whatever makes it easier for you to sew. I like doing it that way because in that way I also know that I'm not catching any extra fabric. Sometimes when I sew it like this and I sew around, I can catch an extra piece under here. So that's just my own preference. Yeah, so we're closing the side completely, Susan. So we're closing this one side completely. Once I've closed this one side, when I do the other side, I will not be closing that side completely. Right? I will leave an opening at the bottom here so I can turn the bag right side out. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so when I'm done, I should still be able to get in here. My zipper is open, so open your zipper. But when I'm done, I'll still be able to get in through the bottom, right? And do what I need to do to turn the bag out. Once I sew the other side on, that opening is how I will get into the bag and turn it right side out, right? Because I left my zipper open. All right, so let's go to the sewing machine and sew this, and then you'll see, maybe once you'll see it, then it may click. Okay. So I'm going to take 2 passes. I'm going to do one at 1/4 of an inch and one at a 1/2 an inch. And it just makes it easier for me to sew. But it's really a 1/2 an inch seam allowance. But for me, it makes it easier to sew because I do the 1/4 of an inch and then I do another 1/4 of an inch. I also use that 1/4 of an inch line to cut my extra fabric. So I just cut along that sewn line. But I do the 1/4 of an inch because in that way, at least all my clips are gone as I'm sewing and I know everything's together. All right, I'm starting on the bottom because that's the straightest part of my bag. I'm using a stitch length of between a 3 and a 3.5. It's up to you. I'm going to back tack. And I will be taking my time around those curves. I don't know how I did this, but I sort of crinkled it over here in the corner. And if you have a walking foot, that may help you as well to do this. Okay. Now for me, that was just 1/4 inch. It should be 1/2 inch. So 2 times 1/4 is 1/2. So I'm going to go one more time all the way around my piece at 1/2 inch. But at least I can get all these clips out of the way. And like I said, I use that line to cut everything. So I'm going to shift it over and I'm going to do another row of stitches, which will be 1/2 inch for me. My little wonky corner over here. Okay. So now let's go back and see what that looks like. The black button on the back. Yeah, so the black button. Yeah, so the black button, what happens is when you get to a thick part, you're supposed to push the button, which helps the foot to pivot. Yeah, so it keeps getting caught. Yeah, it's meant to help. It's sort of like a compensating thing, but it is meant to help you when you get to high points, like you do with what do you call it, a hump jumper. It's supposed to help with that. That's my understanding of what it is. Oh, and I am using. I'm using my Smets needle that I always use. Let's see if I can find my container. And I forget what size it is, but it's reading the comments. It's see if I can hold it up. It's that needle. So hopefully you can see the size of it. And it's the Smets needle. It's like really pointy. And that's what size I use. So I don't know if Nancy, if that question was for me or it was for someone else. But and then Varna says, tool for curves, but it was weird. It curves away. That's interesting. I'd like to see a picture of what that was, Varna. I'd like to see what that was. So before I cut anything or do anything, I'm going to turn my bag right side out just so that you can see what I did. So when I turn this around, I have my zipper open and I'm going to turn it around. So I can turn it totally in right side out. Right? I don't have to worry about it. It turns right side out. And then you can see that this pocket is attached, right? But the other side I have not attached. So I can show you that. So this was the bottom right here. Right, that was my bottom of my bag. And the top piece here is attached. So this is where I use the underside of the zipper. And I said you had to grab it from the back and it attached to this pocket, which is the back side of my bag. So this side needs to be done as well. And this is the side where I'm going to leave an opening at the bottom so I can turn it right side out. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Nancy. That's what I thought that foot was for. I think I have that on my Viking, the same thing, and I had that same foot on my Viking. So thanks a lot for that. All right, so I'm going to turn this now inside out again because we have to attach the other side, right? Because I've attached one side. I need to attach the other side. Once again, your zipper should be open. And you're going to have to grab in here and really turn it inside out. Like all your innards of your bag you should be seeing. So it's not just turning the bag itself. You should have everything inside out. Now, what I will say is the waterproof canvas is thick. So you can leave a 6-inch opening. You can leave an 8-inch opening. Doesn't matter. It just should be an opening enough on the bag so that then you're able to turn it right side out. So I'm going to turn my lining piece over to the back and I'm going to leave an opening. So I'll leave a 6-inch opening. So I'm going from the center. I'm going 3 inches to the left or the right and 3 inches in the other direction as well, to my left. So I'm leaving a pretty hefty opening here. If you think you can do it through a 4 or 5 inch, you can leave it 4 or 5 inches. So I think I put somewhere like 4 to 6 inches for your opening. And this is going to be my opening. So I'm just going to write open. And so when I stitch this, I'm going to stitch around, right, from the start, whichever end you start at, all the way around, and then stop at the other end and leave that part opening for turning. Now, the way that we're going to do this is similar to the way that we did the other side, but it'll look a little bit trickier. So I'm going to shove all of this out of the way. But the key thing to remember is that it has to be right side to right side. So on this side of the zipper, you have that facing. And then you have this part, which is the bottom piece. So this is going to be your top, right? Because we already attached the other one over here. We already attached that. So we're going to turn this and we're going to flip it up like we did the other one so that we can see the foam. And we're going to grab our pocket piece. We're going to match the center marks, right sides together. If you're wrong side to wrong side, or in other words, if this is the wrong side and that's the wrong side, it's wrong. You have to flip it in towards you. And then we're going to clip. And we're pretty much doing the same thing. The only difference, like I said, for this part of it, is we want to make sure that we leave that opening on the bottom for turning. Oh, one more thing is make sure you put your mark on the back of your piece for where you're going to match up that side. I didn't do that on here. So that was that 3-inch mark, right? So I have to do a mark here so I know where to line up my bottom accent piece. All right. Hey, Miss Jillian, how you doing? All right, so now I'm matching the right sides to the right sides. We're making a bowler bag, Jillian. Oh, did it? Oh, yeah, it did. Thank you. That's very odd. Let's try something. Did it come back? That should have brought it right back, hopefully. Thank you for that. You arrived just in time, Jillian. Okay, so now we should be good. So on the bottom, you're going to have to line the center. Make sure to take that part that's on the side, the 3-inch mark. And like I said, you can open up this seam. I just flip it down on the sides, but you can definitely open it up if you want. And you're going to match up that 3-inch mark on the sides. And this one may be a little bit trickier because we have a lot more bag here, right? Because we've done the other side. But if you push everything down and out, it should really, really help. Thank you. It's the Sahel, Sahel. And I was looking at this documentary. So where it came from. There's a place in Africa called Sahel. And I was looking at this documentary and they were talking about how the desert is claiming, because of global warming, is claiming the green, everything that's green in that particular region in Africa. So the documentary was talking about how the government as well as the people are getting together to replant or reclaim plant greenery so that the desert doesn't take over a place that was green. And so Sahel is a place in Africa that is doing that, which I thought was very interesting. I think they call it desertation or something like that. It's called, but it was very interesting. So I named it after that. We always talk about global warming, and I my company has made the decision. Yeah. um, my company made a decision. We have coffee machines, and they made the decision to no longer have cups because cups are not, the cups that we have, even though they're recycled cups, they're not environmentally friendly. So there's been a lot of talk about the fact that now employees have to bring their own cup. I mean, they provide the coffee, but they don't provide the cups. And so people have been saying, well, if I work remotely and then I go to a different location, does that mean I have to walk around with a cup, right? Because then we can actually move between, like somebody can work in New Jersey and come to New York and work, but then their cup is in their Jersey location. Also, we have in some places it's open seating, so you don't really have a desk. So it's been a very interesting topic of conversation around the office about the fact that they don't have cups. Color green. Yeah, that would be perfect, Nancy. Make it in green. And then you could tell the story. That would be perfect. Um, yeah, so that's the story of the cups, and it's so bad that they even took the cups out of the cafeteria. So if you want a coffee cup, because you go down there to buy coffee, you can't get a cup. So, but like I said, I thought it was interesting how governments and people locally are doing something instead of just talking about what's happening. They're doing something to reverse or to try to help what's happening and restore, an environment that's being affected by climate change. So don't forget, you have to leave the bottom here open. Hopefully you marked it. Hopefully I left a big enough opening. If I didn't, you'll see me struggle. Um, Once again, you can always heat this up with a blow dryer to soften the waterproof canvas if you need to. Turn it and it's too stiff, just take a blow dryer or hot blow dryer and blow dry the waterproof canvas. It softens it up, which makes it easier to turn. So I'm almost done. I will be taking 2 rows of stitches on this as well. So I will be taking the 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch. It is a 1/2 an inch seam allowance, so you can just go in and do the 1/2 an inch. I do it just to make sure that with the first pass I'm actually getting all the pieces, and I also do it because I use that 1/4 of an inch to cut off at the end. Um, I use that stitch line to know where to cut. So. All right, so I think I am done. Let's straighten this out a little bit. There we go. And we're going to go to the sewing machine. Oh, once again, first pass is a 1/4 of an inch. Stitch length is between a 3 and a 3.5. I am going to start on this bottom where that opening is. Like I said, it is a lot more bag than we did the first time around. So you may have a little bit of a maneuvering problem. I'm just going to go back and remark this because I marked it on the underside and I'm sewing from the top side. So I'm just going to make a little mark here. I marked it under here so I can't see where I start and stop. Back tack at this point. It's also very important to do it. Sometimes I say, if you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't. But here it is, because when you turn the bag, it creates stress. That's a stress point for turning it. And you can rip stitches, and you don't want to rip those stitches out, because depending on how they get ripped, they're very hard to put back in without turning the bag back, back out, inside out. Okay. I also have a top tension here. So if your machine has that as well, and that's how much the presser foot pushes down. For waterproof canvas, you want to make sure that it can glide under there very easily. It can be sticky like vinyl sometimes. So you want to make sure that it glides under there. So you may have to adjust the presser foot tension, like how hard it's pressing down on your material. See, my clips are upside down. Almost there. And then we'll go back around one more time. I feel like I'm fighting with it. Once again, I'm far away from the sewing machine because I wanted to make sure you could see it with the camera. Okay, and remember to back tack when you get to that opening. Okay. So you know what was fun about this? I ran out of bobbin thread. So we're going to reclip this again. We're going to do this one more time. I ran out of bobbin thread. So let's try it again. And I had a full bobbin, so it must really take a lot of thread. I'm not worrying about the color because this one's a darker blue. It's just the same weight. And that's one thing about thread. When you're doing it, if I know sometimes people want a different color for the lining, so they will put a different colored bobbin thread, different color thread in their bobbin than they do on the top. And so if you're going to do that, I would recommend that you use the same weight thread. And the only way to guarantee that is by using the same company. So if you use thread from the same company. Okay. We need we need something. I heard Lauren say this. We need something that's going to count our stitches. So then we know when we get to the bottom of the bobbin, when it gets to a certain number. At least it gives me practice clipping it. Matter of fact, let me do one thing since I have to resew the whole thing. And I just want to double check that I got the other side. That's just crazy. I want to cry. I think the other side is fine, but when I cut it, I'm just going to make sure I have 2 rows of stitches and not just one. Because there's nothing worse than having 1 row of stitches and I cut it and then I have to go back and sew it. So, okay, so let's do this again. Hopefully it'll be quicker now that I did it once. And I'm glad it's not vinyl, right? Because you get those holes in there. So I guess we have to be grateful for small things. And it couldn't be something that it's totally straight. It had to be something where it's a curve. So now you have to reclip all the curves. One thing I can say is when it's pre-recorded, you really don't see everything that happens behind the scenes. You see this beautiful like process where they tell you do this, and ta-da, you have a bag. Or whatever it happens to be. It could be it could be cooking something. And you see it comes out perfectly. You're like, I know this was edited because it didn't come out perfect. Things happen. Like I said, I'm snipping this just to get it around the curve. Usually if you have a cotton fabric for the lining, there's very little of the clipping because it has a weave and you can pull it in different directions. So you don't have, the same issues that you may have with something that doesn't have, does not have a weave, and therefore you can't stretch it. All righty then. All right, so we'll go back and do it one more time at our sewing machine. Give it a go. Absolutely. So yeah, when you do lives, you can actually get the solution to something. Like Susan asked a very good question when she said, "I can't. Could you redo that again?" Right? If it's recorded, she would then go back and she'd watch it again, and maybe she couldn't get it right. But at least if it's not clear, it's something that somebody can help you with real time. So you're absolutely right, Vonna. And I like the fact that you ladies, and we are ladies here, we that everybody contributes their knowledge, right? So I don't know everything, but I like the way that like Nancy jumped in earlier when there was a question and she was able to help while I, tried to sew the bag. So that's also something very nice about when we're live doing this together. Trying to remember how I sewed this before. Okay, so hopefully. Okay, like Della said yesterday, phew. So like I said, you should have an opening down here, and that's what we're going to turn it through. I'm going to go one more time around. Like I said, I want the 1/2 inch. That was 1/4 inch. And I'll go one more time around another 1/4 inch, so I have a total of a 1/2 inch. Okay, so we're done. We're not done, but we're finished going around the curves. So let's take a look at what we did. I am going to turn it right side out just to make sure I didn't leave anything behind it. I'm going to take a look and just make sure that I do have a double row of stitches. So on this side here, which is the first side I did, I can see that the thread stopped right over here. So I'm going to start there and go back around because I only have a single row of stitches there. So I'm just going to go right back around on this and make sure that I get 2 rows of stitches. So I can see where it actually broke or it actually ran out. So I'm not taking you with me to the sewing machine. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Okay, so I fixed that. So let's do oh, you're blurry again over here. I don't know what's causing. I don't know if it's these clips. I don't know what's causing it to get blurry. But it could be that it's trying to focus and refocus. So let's see if that fixes the issue. And yep, you can always come back and play catch up. All I did was I ran out of bobbin thread and I had to resew this again. So that's what it looks like. It looks like a hot mess. I'm going to clip, and you can see I have like the lines here. So I'm going to clip that 1/4 inch line. I will leave the extra down here. So I'll start right at the side of my opening, and I will just go around and clip right off that 1/4 inch line or stitch line that I had. Like I said, I just want to thin out or reduce down the bulk in here. You can definitely do that, the 1/4 inch line with a longer stitch length if you would like, since you're going to be cutting it off. So if you wanted to use a 5 or a 6, like a basting stitch, you could do that. I just use the same stitch length going all the way around. So that's one side. Like I said, I already did the front and back. I trimmed that off when I did it. I did it overnight, so I just have to do this. If you forgot to leave an opening, that's no worries. You just come back, open up, unpick some of your stitches, and then just go back and do a little back tack at the beginning and the end of the opening. I've done that where I forgot that I had to leave an opening. So it's no worries. You could just unpick, a section on the bottom. Okay. I've trimmed everything by at least a 1/4 inch all the way around on lining and the exterior. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just turn it right side out. So we're going to stick our hand in this opening. You should have left your zipper open. If you haven't, you should be able to slide it with your fingertips. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out. But I'm going to try to start with the far end of my bag. I'm not going to start, for example, over here where the opening is. I'm going to start from the far end and pull that out first. So I'm just pushing and pulling. Once again, if you need to, you can use a blow dryer to soften up this waterproof canvas. Try not to grab your handles and pull too hard on those, because the only thing holding it in there is thread. So if you forgot to back tack or whatever the case may be, you don't want to loosen those threads on your handles. If you put a rivet in it, you should be pretty good. Once again, I use an 8-inch opening. If you use something smaller, you may have a harder time doing this. I mean, I use a 6-inch opening, I'm sorry. coming out. I feel sometimes like it's playing peekaboo. It's like it's out, it's in, it's out, it's in. And then finally it just pops right out. So we have 2 more things we need to do, and then we will be finished. One of them is to make sure that our lining doesn't sag in our bag. But I want to show you this first before I'm gonna have to turn it the other way around, but I want to show you, which is why I'm turning it out. But you would do this at one time. Because if I explained it to you, it may be a little bit confusing. Okay. Whew. All right. There we go. So I'm going to have to turn it back again, but like I said, I just want to show you this. So once you have your bag turned completely out, what you will notice once you straighten it out is that the lining tends to sag from the top. So I'll show you what I mean. So on the top here, this pulls away. So the lining can tend to sag down over here around the top of the bag. So what I'm going to have you do, and you'll do this before you turn it right side out, right? You can see that there's like a little bit of a gappy right there and there. So what we're going to do is when I turn it right side out, I'm going to match the lining seam to my exterior seam. And I'm just going to sew from the bottom here all the way around and attach the two. It's similar to what we did with the alcabulon. Thank you, Susan. It's similar to what we did with, I'm sorry, what we did to the alcabulon where we attached it to the bottom so it wouldn't, it wouldn't move. I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to turn it inside out again so that this doesn't come down. You can see how it comes down like that. When I'm done, it's going to be attached on the inside here, and this is no binding. So that's the other thing. There's no binding for this bag. So I wanted to give you another option on how to make a bag where you did not have to use binding if you're somebody who doesn't like doing it, or you're somebody who doesn't like the look of a binded bag. So I'm going to turn it back around. We're going to do that. We're going to put in our plastic, and then we're going to close up the bottom. All right. So I'm just going to fold this down. It'll just make it easier for me to turn it. I'm going to go back through that opening, which is here. And I'm going to turn it back the other way. So I needed to do this, like I said, to show you, because if I tried to explain it, you won't understand why I'm doing it. All right, and then once we've done that, and we're going to do that on both sides. All right. You should only have to turn your bag once when you do it. So don't feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to do that twice. No, you just do it once. And this part will be easy because you'll see they match. Each side matches, so you don't have to guess how you're attaching. You just match it. It's not making me happy. On the other bag, I did this like 3 or 4 times. But for some reason, this bag is not letting me do it as easy. Okay. Come on. We should time this. Oops. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. I'll sew it before I'm done. So this is how we're going to do it. That's there we go. All right. So whew, great. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the bag once you're done, and you would not have turned it right side out, and you're going to match up those seams. And you don't have to sew across the bottom. You just have to sew around the sides and across the top, right? So if you look at the bag here, this is the front and this is the lining that corresponds. On the other side of the bag, right? This is the back or the front, and that's the lining. So all you're going to need to do while your bag is just like this, right? You haven't turned it yet. Right? It's going to look just like this. And believe it or not, that's the bottom. So if I push, that's where my purse feet were. If I push it down. All right. So this is the top because you can see the curve, the straps. This is the side of the bag. All right. And then this part here is the bottom. That's why I left the opening. So what you're going to do is you're going to clip along the top. So it's exterior, which has like the foamy piece, and the lining, and you're going to clip them together, right? So it's the lining in the front or the back, according. But when you look at the directions, you see me pinching. That's because I'm pushing this down to match up these edges. And all you're going to do is stitch, and it doesn't matter if it's perfect. Nobody cares. This is just to keep it together, like I said, just so that it doesn't sag. So what I do is I sew from about here, maybe 3/4 of an inch past that seam amount. If you can get further down, that's great. But just like right here and around and back to the equal side. So this is where the bottom was connected. So if you start from there and sew around and just follow it and do like about 1/8 of an inch, just to catch it. That means that when you turn the bag right side out, it's not going to sag. The top of the bag is not going to sag down, and the sides of the bags are not going to go in. So you just push it right down out of your stitch line. And I just go, like I said, to where that seam is at, and I attach the bottom. I just go from there all the way around to the other side, the same point at about 1/8 of an inch. You can do a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. Just don't go past, because remember you've trimmed this. Don't go past that stitch line because that's your actual line, your sewing line, which was your 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I did one side, and then I'm going to do the same, just pushing my bottom in, and I'm going to do the same over here to this side. And you can do them one at a time. Do one, come back, and then do the other one if that's easier for you. But once again, this is where it attaches, and I'm just attaching it to itself on the inside. So I hope that makes sense. So it looks a hot mess, but I'll show you when I'm done how it doesn't come down at all. And it's just, like I said, another way to do it if you don't like binding. Because a lot of bags today are, you know, when you look at the pattern, a lot of them are bound. They bind everything. And I'm not very good at binding because I don't do it. You know, it's not a skill set that's I've done a lot of, so I tend not to like the way my binding comes out. Other people who've done it for a while, it comes out beautiful, but my binding, I don't like it. So if you can't get down as far as here, that's okay. Just make sure you get down about maybe 2 inches around the curve, and that'll suffice as well. All right, so I'm going to go in. I'm going to sew this at about 1/8 of an inch going all the way around. I just have to stay, you know, above my actual 1/2 inch stitch line. So as long as I'm somewhere in between there, I'm good. All right, so let's do that on both sides. I don't really care about the stitch length, so I'm going to increase mine to a 4. So between a 4 and a 4.5. Because I just want to make sure I catch it. If you have a zigzag on your machine, you can also zigzag this. That's something else you can do. So that's one side, and then I'm going to do the other side. Do some bulk here, so. Okay. So now what we can do is we can turn this right side out. We don't have to turn it inside out again. We turn it right side out. And we should be able to get to that opening that we had right here. Oh, before I do that, I did rip mine a little bit, so let me just go back and repair that. When I turned it the second time, just made a bigger opening. So I'm just going to stitch it back. Because I don't need that humongous opening at the bottom. Okay. And then we can stick our hand in that opening and turn it right side out again. So I'm going to grab one of these corners over here. Grab the other corner. You're definitely going to need to give this a good press. Okay, and then we're going to measure our bottom. I had mine from my pre-cut, but you should definitely measure yours, and I'll show you what you need to do for that. There we go. So I push my fist to the side and I just poke all this out. But I'll show you what I did and how it's different now than it was before. So now if you look at this here, I can't pull it away. This doesn't come down. It doesn't sag into the bag. It fits right nicely around the curve. Like I said, you don't have to do the bottom because you're going to push the bottom down. But the sides over here, you cannot pull them away. I'm trying to pull them. They don't come away because they're attached right here at the seam line. And like I said, that way you don't have to do any binding. If you did the bag in cotton, probably it'll be a lot easier to turn right side out. But you can use a blow dryer to heat it up, which would have also made it easier. I don't use it for the demos or the lives because it makes a lot of noise. But you would give this a good iron. Make sure you push everything out and down so you can see inside my bag. These are my pockets. I'm going to go back in and straighten out all of my corners and iron everything out. And then that will be the bag. I like the fact, like I said, that it opens wide as well, which is, I didn't put a crossbody on it because I wanted to make sure it was a nice wide opening. It's definitely a nice craft bag. So if you're somebody who knits, crochets, goes on a sewing retreat, it's perfect for that because you can put like scissors and little things in there. I have a foldable ruler. It should also fit like a small iPad in here as well. So how do we do this? The plastic. So you're going to come down here and you're going to measure. So you're going to straighten everything out, give it a good iron, and you're going to measure from end to end here. So from here to here, right? You're going to measure it. And then you're going to measure the width, right? And like I said, I gave you approximate measurements. Once you have that, round your corners on your piece. So make sure this is round so there's nothing sharp to poke out. You have that opening in the bottom. You're going to take your piece and it's going to be hard for you to put it in this way because the slit goes here and not down the middle. So what you're going to do is push it in your bag and you're going to push it into the front, right? So I'm pushing it up towards the front of the bag or the back, whichever, your bag is. and just push it right up in there. Once you get it into the bag, you can then rotate it. So then you'll be able to stick your hand in there and manipulate it and rotate it so that it's flat. But if you try to just put it in, it's not gonna go. I've tried. So now once I do that, I have it now at the bottom of my bag, right? So when you push it in, you're gonna push it in so it comes in here. Stick your hand in, rotate it around, and then it'll be right at the bottom right here. And it's not gonna move once you get it in there, as long as you measure it, you know, and it should be snug, right? It should be pretty tight in the bottom, and it is. So the last thing you're going to do is fold under your seam here at the bottom. So we're just going to fold this down. And it should at this point be pretty much this. It'll either be a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, depending on how you trimmed off the extra. But you just want to get it even. You're then going to take your little clips. And I'm not going to sew mine because I want to change out the thread so it's the same color as this. I have blue thread in there. And I want it to be the same color, so I won't sew mine. But you're going to fold it under. And then you're going to stitch it closed, this opening closed, using a 1/8 of an inch or a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch to close that. So it is a pretty big opening. Like I said, I made it big because it was, you know, it is hard to turn out. Okay, and then you're going to stitch that. You're going to stitch this closed, right? And then once it's stitched, you just push it right back in. Your bottom is on there. Straighten everything out. Like push your corners out and everything. And the purpose of the little tabs on the side is so you have something to hold onto when you're zipping up your bag. So that's why we have the little tabs there in case people wonder, why did you put that there? All right. And then when you're done, that should be your bag. That's going to be my front. All right. Watching later, I would say. So I'm going to say that because I don't think everybody I don't know if you guys can see, those of you who are on YouTube can see the Facebook comments. I see all the comments. So I think what Susan is saying, and I totally agree, is that just want to get myself on camera so you're not in disembodied voice coming out of it. So Susan is based, and I think I'll put this in the comments as well, in the show notes. And you know, for anyone who's watching this, that when it comes time to turn the bag, watch it to the end first, and then because I'll show you how to, another option of finishing the bag without using binding. So really, when you're doing this bag, if you watch it to the end, and you shouldn't be pre-turning it, you should wait till the end. So I'm going to put that at the top of the description. So if anybody, because people read the descriptions as well. And you know, it definitely is something that I think once you've done it once, if you do another bag similar to this and it says binding, you may give it a try. You may try to figure out, okay, how can I do this using that technique without doing the binding? And after you do it a couple of times, it starts to click, and the bags, I think, look so much better because people go, well, how did you do that without binding? So thank you guys so much for joining me for day 3 and hanging in there with me. I'm excited to see what you guys make, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. And I always try to end with, and remember, be bold and sew a bag you'll love. Have a great evening, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.